Happy New Year!
Happy 2025.
Happy 2025. Oh, Donald's microphone is very far away from him.
Yes.
There you go.
He asked me if I was ready, and then I thought the answer was
And
yes.
Donald lied.
The
He was not ready.
The answer was
The answer was a resounding no.
false. Starting out the new year on a high note with the chirping of my alarm.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so Happy New Year, everybody. Our millions of loyal followers.
Millions and millions. Hoping for billions in this. In the second half of the decade.
Second half.
Avi, what are your hopes for the second half of 2025?
For the purposes of legal liability, I will not say my true wishes.
There you go.
But, you know.
I'm hoping for a different vibe. Like, I will also not say the entire list, but I think like 2020 through 2024 does like, I think 2024 is the first year that started to feel like different than the just big conglomerate of like COVID and post-COVID.
That's fair.
I'm hoping for a different vibe. Distinct years.
Distinct
years going forward. Yes.
Yeah, I can get behind that for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I want.
Speaking of distinction, you know what is not distinct?
What is not distinct, bud?
What is not distinct is the plot of Nosferatu from. And before everybody gets their panties in the bunch, I did like it.
Yeah.
But I think in one of our last episodes we talked about how you wanted me to start. You wanted me to start giving my own synopses.
Yeah, give me your own Instano synopsis.
My first college try. We are reviewing Nosferatu, which I just saw yesterday. It came out Christmas 2024.
Which is a choice, by the way.
Which is a choice. Which does somewhat take place on Christmas. But in a world where everyone is tired of remakes, join us, Robert Eggers, in A Vampire with No Hips, in a retelling of Dracula.
Yeah, that's very fair.
Yeah.
Yeah, dude, he do not got no booty.
Got no hips. All of her body. I'm surprised that man wasn't rolling in a wheelchair this whole movie. It's kind of the build he had.
Yeah. You know, that's actually a very good point now that you bring it up. Like, the fact that
he's on that LA 2028 Special Olympics for swimming.
Damn. That's the thing. Like, I think Hollywood has trained us to be like, vampires are hot.
Yeah.
And even Dracula. Like, if you watch not only like the Gary Oldman Dracula,
Bela Lugosi for sure,
but like, God, what's the one from like the 70s? Who's the guy? Not the 70s, sorry, the 30s.
Bela Lugosi, yeah.
Like, they're hot.
Yeah.
And you can see the appeal.
I think Bela Lugosi is the hottest.
For sure, yes. Yeah. Yes, the hottest, for sure, by a mile. Right. But then you have this. Actually, even the TV series Dracula.
He's pretty hot.
I would say that dude is pretty fucking hot.
He's pretty hot. Now, granted, this Dracula does look more like book Dracula.
Yeah. But ain't nobody want that.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Book accuracy can go out the window in some sections. I feel that way because, like, when we watched Dracula on the boat.
We watched Dracula on the boat.
I believe that was last year.
Yeah.
Last year, I think. Like, that was for sure, like, an ugly Dracula.
That was an ugly Dracula.
It was an ugly Dracula. He got better towards the end of the movie. I think he, like, once he started eating people, he got kind of good looking.
Yeah. Less peckish.
But he still looked ugly as fuck. But then this movie is not, okay, it is also fair to say it's not Dracula, but it is also Dracula.
Yes.
Right?
The plot, I didn't realize how similar.
No, this is Dracula.
Yes. And I haven't seen the original Nosferatu. And it wasn't until this past year that I learned that Nosferatu was just like
an unofficial knockoff of Dracula.
Yeah, but
this is Timu Dracula.
But I was not prepared for how much Timu Dracula this was going to be.
I remember watching this, and like I knew, I haven't seen the original Nosferatu, but I've seen like the covering of it, like through the kill count, and like it goes through the whole plot, and I'm like, oh yeah, this is just exactly the story of Dracula.
Yep.
Down to the boat.
Down to the boat.
Down to the boat.
Down to the boat.
So this movie's kind of weird because like I do appreciate what it's going for. It is going for that like gothic horror, which can be very slow. It can be very daunting. It can be a bit of a drag.
Yeah.
But I also just feel like then if that's what you're going with, you need to have some sort of payoff. And I just don't feel like, for me personally, that was met. I do feel like it's very well acted. I feel like it looks beautiful. There's a lot of shots in this movie that I'm like, damn,
Gorgeous
that is a great shot. There's a shot when Nicholas Hoult is getting taken to Count Orlok's castle.
Yeah.
And it's like pitch black, and all you see is like the silhouette of the road and the guy, and like it's a really, really cool shot. You're like, damn, that is the dark in that scene looks really, really imposing. And there's like stuff like that, like there's a lot of like play with shadows, and like I think that's really cool. But I can't just like allow the rest of this to go on the cool. Like I wanted a little bit more.
I think I like this movie more than you do.
Oh, for sure.
And I really appreciate a lot of the gothic and Victorian elements. I think it actually does a lot of justice to the Dracula tale, the historicity of it, the main like thematic points of that original story. And I will also say, to steal the term from friend of the show, Marcus, the cosmonaut at Cosmonaut Variety Hour.
Did he review this already?
He did not, but
No.
he has this term called the sauce. And I will say, I don't think this movie has the sauce.
This movie does not have the sauce.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
It does not.
It doesn't dazzle. Like, it doesn't, like, and I think this is where we've talked on the show about execution and how, like, just because you know that a character makes it out alive, or just because you know that this is a prequel, doesn't mean you still can't have, like, tension and you can't still have intrigue and, like, a plot, right? I will say that because of, and I don't even say I'm an expert in the Dracula story, but because of how many times I've seen versions of the Dracula story, I was never really like scared.
No, this movie is not scary at all.
Yeah.
When Katie and I were talking about this movie, because I was like, do you want to go see this movie with me and Eric?
Yeah.
And she was like, no, not really. Looks scary. And I'm like, maybe it might be scary. I don't know. But then when I got home, I was like, listen, you would not like that movie. She goes, is it because it's scary? I go, no, because it's just really kind of boring.
Yeah. Yeah,
like, Katie would find this movie absolutely boring.
She probably would. I would not go so far as to call it boring, but I will say, like, that feeling of dread that I actually think all of Eggers' other major movies have, like, is just not as present in this movie. And I'm kind of surprised that this movie has gotten as much positive buzz as it's gotten.
Yeah. I agree with that. I do think that out of all of his movies, this one is a very easy slot in my fourth place for him.
Yes, and I was surprised. I didn't want to go into thinking that way, but I would also describe this movie as like, if you asked me to go paint a picture, if I was a renowned artist who could do a lot of really like cool things, and you asked me to go paint a picture of the Sears Tower, and I went and I gave you like a picture of the Sears Tower, and it looked very much like
looks exactly like the Sears Tower.
Like, that's great. Like, you picked a really good, realistic Sears Tower. But like, that's all it is. It's just like it's a very good picture of the Sears Tower. Mm-hmm. And I would say not much more. I think this is a good telling of the Dracula story.
Yeah.
And not much more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not gonna trash this movie. I don't think it's bad in that sense.
It does a lot of good things.
There's a lot of really good things, but I just feel like of all the movies that I saw this year, I feel like this one accomplished less of what I was hoping it would.
When did Vampire in a Boat come out? Did we review that in 2024?
We reviewed that last year, I believe.
23?
Was it 23 or 22?
Oh, let me pull up.
It was Last Voyage
of the Demeter.
This is 2023 movie.
It was 2023?
2023.
So between that, Castlevania.
I would much rather sit down and watch Castlevania
right?
In a heartbeat. Man.
Netflix Dracula, other tellings of Dracula. Like I feel like I've seen enough iterations.
And here's the thing that kind of annoys me a little bit about Nosferatu is that like you have the ability, because it's not Dracula, right? And I get that maybe back in like the 20s when the movie came out, like the original German movie came out, you could make the argument of like, well, he wanted to make that movie, but he didn't have the rights to do it, so he did this.
Right.
But now, you can just make a Dracula movie.
Yeah.
For the most part. Or if you're going to make a Nosferatu movie, then like, it's going to just feel derivative because by now we have seen so many versions of Dracula.
And the characters in this movie are also aggressively British. Like, I had to double take many times when I was like reminded that this was set in Germany because like, it very much feels like Victorian England.
Because they're all speaking with British accents.
But
that's the beauty of the original one, that is because it is silent.
Yes.
Like, you are reading the text, so your brain just goes, whatever.
Exactly.
Right? But it does take you out. It's like the effect when we were watching Napoleon.
Yeah.
We're like, oh, look at these fucking British people. And you go, wait a minute. No, they're not. Because now they're talking to a British person who sounds exactly the same as these French people.
Yeah.
So, like, it like, messes with your head a bit.
Fuck, we reviewed Napoleon.
That was our first review of the year, I believe. Or one of our first reviews of the year.
Our first review of the year last year was Aquaman. Then Poor Things. Then we posted our best and the worst. Then Argyle. Then Out of Dark. When the fuck was Napoleon?
I don't even think... Did we review Napoleon? We did review
Oh, we
Napoleon.
did. December 21st, 2023.
Okay, so it was one of our last ones. Okay.
Yeah.
But, I don't know. I just feel like the problem... Nosferatu falls into that problem where it's too derivative of Dracula at this point. Especially in our culture where vampires are like so common.
Nearly omnipresent. Yeah.
Yeah,
nearly omnipresent.
But then the idea of Nosferatu is like it's a different take on it. But then you also can't then reinvent the wheel because then you are no longer in Nosferatu territory.
Yeah.
So like you're kind of like setting yourself up to almost fail. And you know what? Mad props to Bobby Eggers to want to do this. But I feel like it was almost an impossible task.
No. Yeah.
And I don't, because like The Witch, fantastic.
Love The Witch.
The Lighthouse, fantastic.
Yep.
I didn't love The Northman, but I really, really liked it.
I like The Northman more as time goes on.
Really?
I do.
I think I like it less the more time goes on. But then Nosferatu is the first movie that he's made that is solely based on something different. Like something somebody else did, and it's his weakest, and I'm like, I think that's his... You know how we have directors like... And I hate that I'm comparing the two, but like Zack Snyder.
Yeah.
Where you're like, visually, you're a great director.
Yep.
Like you make really visually appealing things. But when you write something yourself, it's no bueno.
Right.
Give somebody else the writing thing.
Yeah.
You make it look.
You make
nice
it look
on
really
screen.
pretty. Yeah.
300 is fantastic.
Exactly. Watchmen.
Look great. Yep. But as soon as you're the one making Sucker Punch, as soon as you're the one making Army of the Dead, like you're making me look at very beautiful slop.
Right.
And I think he's the opposite. Not the opposite, but that's his.
Because he can still make something look amazing.
Because he makes his stuff look great.
Yeah.
But I want him to then do his own original things. I think he's better as a creative than as an adapter.
Those movies do have the sauce.
Those movies do have the sauce.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Which I love The Witch.
Which
is the problem.
Yeah.
Right? Because like ideally, like The Witch is like one entity. It's this witch.
Yeah.
And it gives that family that sense of dread.
Yes.
That Orlok just does not give.
That does not give. Right.
So let's talk about this movie.
I was gonna say we do have nice things to say.
Yeah, let's get into the good stuff.
Yeah.
So it does follow a very basic plot. So let's just kind of run through it. So we have Ellen, who is played by Johnny Depp's daughter. This is also new because in the original, she has no real connection to Orlok until he meets
not Jonathan Harker.
Yeah. But here we see that she does have a connection, which I almost thought was like, is this movie going somewhere entirely new? Like, are we starting at the end here and going back to how this like happened? But no, you start with this like, she's like a younger woman who has a pre-existing relation to Count Orlok.
A pre-existing condition. Uninsurable.
Uninsurable. I said connection.
In America, pre-2010 and after 2024.
Yeah. Later, she marries Nicholas Hoult.
Yep.
Nicholas Hoult gets a job. His job is to go sell Dracula, but not Dracula, a home.
Yeah.
And then shenanigans happens when they're together. And then Dracula goes to not London.
Right.
And then shenanigans happen. And then everybody dies.
Yeah.
That is the basic premise of this, which is, again, the basic story of
Dracula.
Right? But it's, I don't know. I don't understand the point of making... Because, like, I almost would have rather them just, from the get-go, make this Ellen's movie. Like, fully Ellen's movie.
I think that's my chiefest complaint with this movie. There is no anchor character.
Because, like, ideally, it's going to be Hutter, right? Because, like, that's the anchor character in the original. But I feel like this movie almost makes it feel like an ensemble cast because you have your Willem Dafoes, you have your Ralph Inesons, you have your Aaron Taylor Johnsons,
Yeah.
and then you also have your Lily Rose Depp, right? But like they almost all feel like they get, I don't want to say equal screen time, but relatively equal screen time.
Relatively equal screen time where none really has like the character gravitas to really like command my empathy or like my like super rooting for them.
Yeah.
Like I'm only really rooting for them because there's trouble afoot. There's not
And
one
you don't
that,
want this ugly ass vampire to win.
yeah, not one that I really like love of any of these characters.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's that's the other thing. When I was watching the beginning of this and I saw that scene and it kind of dawned on me that like, no, this isn't happening in the present. This is like happening in the past. That's when I thought like, oh, we are leading into her being like the main character. We're doing something new here. We are seeing this story through Ellen's lens.
And The Witch is one of your like classic good for her movies, so it makes sense that Robert might take this.
Which you would hope,
Yeah.
right?
As I refer to him by his first name because we're best of friends. So I have a confession for you. We were like 10 minutes late to the theater. Missed this, and the theater that we saw it at does not have like 30 minutes of previews. Like
What theater did you guys go to?
We went to Charlestown.
Okay, so Katie and I were talking about that yesterday because
Yeah.
I was like, we were gauging what time you guys would be at the restaurant.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, they're going to Charleston, and I know they don't play 30 minutes worth of previews.
Yeah.
So, like, if they got it this time, that's when the movie should get out.
Yeah.
So that does make sense. Like, if you're used to having 30 minutes of previews, not
Correct.
there.
Correct. No, not
Yeah.
there. Not there. So we
There
missed
in Hollywood Palms for sure don't.
we missed like that first we missed that backstory bit. So I had to my lovely bride summarize that for me. And then I did some brief reading on the wikis. I actually I don't even like the fact that they had this connection earlier on.
Yeah.
And I think it's because the characters themselves are just so weak is almost too harsh, but because none of them are amazing, like I'm like, okay, well, what makes this girl special? Hopefully I'll see something. And
that's the thing.
Yeah.
If you wanted to make this be her movie,
Yeah.
you could make it, why is she so special?
Yes.
What makes Orlok drawn to her?
Exactly.
Right? Because like at first it seems like it's a very like almost like a spiritual connection, right?
Yeah.
That by the end of the movie he wants to make it a physical connection.
Yeah.
Right? Actually be there with her and take her.
Yeah.
Right? And you could explore that, but this movie just does not do that. So then it almost makes this beginning part feel redundant.
Yeah.
Because you're like, it doesn't matter.
Well, that's the thing. I didn't feel like I lost what I was watching, and before Rosario explained it to me, I didn't feel like I really lost anything that important.
No, it doesn't.
10 minutes. Yeah.
I feel like if you miss that scene and you get to the end, it doesn't recontextualize what you just saw.
Yeah.
They do have the one like throwaway line where she is explaining to her husband. She goes like, oh, a few years ago, like we had this connection, but like I ended it or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And he left me alone, but now he's back, right? And you're like, okay, I guess,
Right.
but like it doesn't add anything to the plight here. Like, why is he drawn to her other than like she's somewhat psychic?
Yeah.
She's got some sort of the shine. I don't fucking know.
Yeah.
Like it's that's the type of stuff that I kind of wish we would have gotten more of.
I almost like the more original telling. I almost find it more interesting where the only reason that these band of characters is in trouble is just because like not Jonathan Harker just happens to be the one who's like sent over to Transylvania to handle the Count estate.
Yeah, because I believe in that movie, in the original one, is when he's like feeding off of them.
Yep.
Then Orlok gets like they don't have that here, but in that original, it almost makes it seem like he sees through when he's feeding to them. He sees like their life.
Yes, and then he's like, I want more.
Infatuated with this woman, and he's like, I want her.
Yes,
because I met you, now I want her.
Which to me is more interesting.
For sure.
Than
this is very
underdeveloped psychic plot.
This feels very simpy.
Yeah.
And I know that people are complaining that it's so groomy.
Right.
Which I get. I can see, but I do feel like it's almost the opposite, where it's he just simping over this lady that he can't have.
Yeah.
Very incel-y. It's almost the opposite of.
I would say
that.
Simping and grooming are actually probably not that disconnected.
Not disconnected, but I feel like they're opposites of that spectrum.
Possibly, but I could see an intersection. Anyway.
Sure.
So the not Jonathan Harker goes to do his business abroad in Romania.
Yeah.
And then we cut to a scene with some Romani.
Yeah. I can't remember. Do they fully drop the gypsy word?
Yeah. What
right?
an innkeeper does. He's like,
Yeah.
well, you gypsies, cut down.
Yeah. And again, it's this kind of stuff that I kind of like seeing. I like seeing the lore.
The lore is cool.
I feel like when you're giving me vampire lore,
yeah,
that's where you have your chance to do something interesting with it.
I actually found the scenes in Romania outside the castle to be the most interesting scene.
Yeah, because it's the scene where he's seeing this ritual happen
Yep.
when they think that someone is a vampire.
Yeah.
Right? Whether he is or not, it's never fully explained. Because I believe they're parading around the naked woman on the horse.
Exactly.
And
the grave that it stops at.
yeah.
Like, there's the fucking vampire.
And I mean, the body does move.
And throw up
a whole bunch of blood,
Yeah,
right? So
exactly.
like the implication is that this is actually a vampire.
Yeah, unless this was just buried today.
Then it could just be a dude who may not have even been dead.
Yeah.
Right?
In which case I'd be pissed if I was at town. We just fucking buried this person. Now I gotta dig up this dirt again.
Yeah.
It takes time to dig a hole.
It does take time to dig a hole.
Yeah.
Surprising amount of time to dig a hole.
Yeah.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
But then you also have the scene after he escapes. He gets rescued
By a nun.
by a nun.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
A Romanian Orthodox nun.
Sure.
Thanos people were represented. There is erasure of my community in a lot of these movies. In The Exorcist, the priest is Greek, but what religion is he? Catholic.
Catholic. Yeah.
Wrong.
Yeah, that's
Continue.
fair.
Continue.
That's fair.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Yeah. And the nun was right.
The nun was right.
She's
was
like, you gotta stay here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She was like, nope. This is your safe space.
Exactly.
But all of that, like, it's giving you this like this background, this lore that makes Orlok and like what he is slightly more interesting.
Yeah.
But then once you leave this space, that all that just goes out the window. You kind of get a little bit of it when they introduce Willem Dafoe, who plays like your Van Helsing style.
Yeah.
Professor Albin Eberhard von Franz.
Yes.
Who in this movie is played as like an eccentric, like pseudoscience believer.
He's
right?
into the alchemy.
He's into alchemy. He's into like witchcrafty stuff. The occult. I believe they drop like they fully say like he's into the occult. Like,
does he ever do anything like cool and useful?
No. The coolest thing he does is he sets that room on fire at the end of the movie.
He sets the room on fire, right? He gets the book with
oh yeah, where he gets the
where he's like,
this is what you gotta do. You gotta bait this vampire to death.
Yeah. I was trying to think of like his actual, other than leading them down the road of like, you got a supernatural problem here, folks.
Which is that really is the only thing he does.
Yeah.
Which
is important. Which is important.
It is important, but I feel like you could write that character out and have them do some light research, and you get to the same
conclusion.
Like he can go, like Huddle can go into town and be like, "Listen, I talked to some Romani people. Can you please point me to your Romani section in your library?" And like, "Oh, it's over there." And then he finds a book.
Javi's implying the Romani have books. Anyway.
They do.
They probably do.
I mean, is that not what he found in his book? That wasn't his book. He found that book.
I think so.
That is Romani literature. Thanos erasing Romani culture.
So sad.
But that's the thing. I don't know. I feel like this movie took almost what was there both too literally, and not even both, just too literally, and just kind of redid that and didn't then expand on the fact that like 100 years removed, we kind of need something else.
Yeah.
We need a bit more.
Which makes me gain more of an appreciation for Dracula on about the movie. In the sense that it at least took...
It took a paragraph.
Yeah.
And said, let's make a movie out of this.
It took the risk. Yes.
And you know what? As much as we lolled and trolled...
Right.
Like, it did make a concise movie out of it.
And I will say...
I had more fun watching Dracula on the boat.
As much as other people also really love that movie.
Yeah, that's true.
People like Dracula on a boat.
I would say it's a more fun movie
than this.
I think this is a better crafted movie. This is a more like quote unquote put together movie. But if I'm like, hey, I'm hanging out with my friends and we're gonna watch something fun, I would be 9 out of 10 times I'm gonna put Dracula on the boat over this.
Maybe.
Because like that has excitement, that has scares.
I won't dissent.
That has lulls.
I won't dissent.
I feel like our main character in that movie is great. The Black Doctor.
Yeah.
Dude, he's great.
He is a great character.
He's a better character than I feel like any in this movie, which kind of sucks.
Wow.
He's more interesting. I think he has more dimension.
Well, it is interesting because in that movie, now I'm kind of going on a tangent, but they took, because in that movie it is important that he is black, right? If I remember correctly.
Yeah, I mean it's a big point of contention with a lot of the other characters. Like it moves the plot a lot.
Well, and as we're discussing the way the Romani population could have been used, right? That movie does like take into account, like in history, like you would have had a more multicultural society where like the consequence of your race was certainly very consequential. So what would it mean if there was,
It has that factor.
Yeah.
So it has the character's race,
right?
Which I believe you even mentioned that in the Netflix series, the doctor who plays that same role is Indian, and that is also a point of contention, I believe, right?
If I remember correctly, yeah.
I believe something like that.
Yeah.
You have in that movie, in Dracula in the Boat, you have the conflict of the woman,
right,
who is a woman from Transylvania, I'm assuming, because that's where Jack is coming from.
Yeah, probably.
Right? So
yeah.
they talk about her gender and also where she's from.
Yeah.
So like all of those things move the plot forward.
Yeah.
Whereas in this, because it doesn't focus, I think if this movie had, again, if it focused on Ellen.
Yeah.
And her saying, no, this is what's happening. This is why you can't go there. And use that like, oh, you're a woman, you're hysteric. That could then lead to some like plot and like conflict within the characters. Whereas in this movie, I feel like it's just like, your horny vampire caused my family to die. I hate you now.
Yeah.
And that's the extent of like the inter-character conflict.
Yeah. Sad.
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 Sad,
sad
right?
sad,
like
yeah.
I'm not off base here, right?
No, I don't disagree.
Am I winning you over here?
I am. Yes. Yes.
Hell yes.
I think like where this movie shines the most is kind of like the exploration that it does with the very classic themes of Dracula, like the nature of evil, and then science and reason versus spirituality, right? I think that's where I got the most pleasure out of this movie. But character depth was not.
Character depth was
not the category.
I do appreciate though Bill Skarsgård as a character actor.
Yeah.
So much.
Yeah.
Because, like, man,
that voice is great.
He is young.
Yep.
How old is
Bill Skarsgård?
How old is Bill Skarsgård? Because he cannot be that much older than us. He's got to be like 35, 36.
Born in 1990. 34.
So 34. Okay.
Yeah.
So he's right around our age. And under his belt at this age, he has, at the very least, two very, very, like, significant characters under his belt.
Yeah.
Right? Because he is...
And the Crow.
Listen, we don't talk about the Crow, but like he's got Count Orlok, which is like, it's a choice of a character.
I do love that big hulking demeanor and that like
the fucking gaudy ass mustache.
Voice. Yes.
Dude, that mustache is so fucking great.
Yeah.
But like playing Pennywise is such a defining character for him that it got him cast in Barbarian as like the character you can't trust.
The bait and switch bad guy.
He is.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
So like that's so, to me, is so almost iconic for him, and I'm happy for him.
Oh, absolutely, me too.
I do think his look for Orlok, it's a bit of a double-edged sword, where like I know he is shot to be imposing, he is made to be very threatening, but at the same time, because we don't really see him, like I can't picture him.
I actually like how they do the visuals with Orlok throughout as this movie goes. I like how he starts off the movie pretty much like 99% in the dark. Yes. Yeah. And then gradually you see more of him as goes on, and you don't really see him like in the sunlight, so to speak, until like the very...
you see him in the sunlight, but you see his ass.
Yeah.
That's it.
And you see that beautiful balding head with those bulbous pustules. I do like the way that the obscuring of the character creates a sense of menace. Mm-hmm. And then gradually showing him shows a bit more intrigue as the movie goes on.
Mm-hmm.
And then fully showing him exposed coincides with the moment he dies. I do like that. Mm-hmm. And to be honest, I don't really feel like I really don't feel like I need more.
No, I for the purposes of me, because like I said, like Pennywise, right? If I think of Pennywise, what does Pennywise look like? You can
picture the clown.
I can kind of picture it.
Yeah.
I know we just talked about the other day about like how I can't really picture things in my head.
Yeah.
But like when I think of like Pennywise, I can go, oh, that's what this will look like. I could describe you 100% what Pennywise looks like. I could not describe you 100% what Count Orlok looks like. I can describe to you what the original Count Orlok looks like.
Yeah.
And it's such an iconic visual.
Yes.
That like has stood the test. Like his version of that Dracula figure is so ingrained in our brains that it's been in SpongeBob.
Mm-hmm.
It was used as one of the vampire designs in What We Do in the Shadows.
It's got to be an inspiration for a lot of vampires.
It is.
I feel like a lot of Elder Scrolls vampires might take their imagery might take inspiration from there. I feel like Dracula on a boat has to take imagery from Nosferatu.
I think so too. It does, but and then this thing, like, even though like his voice is very like imposing in this, and I do associate now Bill Skarsgård with a Nosferatu, I feel like it's more based around the hype around the character, the voice of the character, less so what the character actually looks like, because we don't really get to see.
But I think that's effective in the sense that it makes him such a threatening presence. Like even on that first night when Nicholas Holt's character, not Jonathan Harker, arrives at the castle, and he's like, drink. And he's like, okay. He's like, go to bed.
Go to bed.
And then I forget if he protests that night, but there's a point where I feel like his character would realize, like, I'm fucked. Like, especially when it gets to the point. I think
it's the second night when
he's like, hey, man, I'd like to go. He's like, it's bad omen. Yeah, and he's like, oh.
Yeah, he's
GG.
Yeah, that's what he does. He's pretty cooked.
Yeah. Which, we mentioned this in Dracula in about, but when I read Dracula recently-ish, I was surprised how quickly you see the Count is just straight up into like some shit. Like on night one, he's straight up like crawling on the walls of the castle.
In this movie?
No, in the book.
Oh, I see.
He looks out the window because he hears some shit, and like he just sees Dracula straight up Spider-Man crawling. That's the word that he uses in the book, is Spider-Man crawling.
Oh, that's funny.
Because no, it doesn't. But but it would be funny. But
I thought you meant like crawling like a spider on the wall.
No, I meant like, but that's what he's doing. Because like he is crawling like Spider-Man on the wall, and upside down too, I think. And Jonathan Harker's like, oh, something seems
amiss. Yeah. Something's afoot.
Yes. So yeah, he was imposing for me, and I do now like my Draculas, even though it's not as hot. I do now like my Draculas with their Hulk Hogan mustache. I think
that's so fucking funny.
It is very funny.
It is. Again, this movie makes a lot of choices.
Yep.
I think going with the giant mustache. I mean, it's very. I would say it's not inaccurate.
No, it is accurate.
Because, like, I don't know how they describe in the book, because, like, the original character of Dracula is based on Vlad the Impaler.
Correct.
And that man had that mustache, like 1,000%. Like,
mustache. Yeah.
So that tracks.
It fits.
It fits. I would probably say the biggest thing for me in this movie is and I think this kind of falls in the problem with marketing again that we've had almost throughout this entire year and in years past, where like when we advertise movies, there is that desire to want to like draw people in with hype.
Yeah.
And I completely understand. But I also feel like you need to also temper expectations.
Yeah.
I think you know how you asked me in the beginning today what one of my hopes was for 2025? I hope
come full circle.
We come full circle.
Yeah.
I hope in 2025 we get to the point where we are a little bit more realistic with our marketing and expectations.
Good luck.
I know it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
But I also feel like
as an audience,
not doing you a service.
As an audience or as a studio?
I almost say both. Like it's on both people. Because like you watch a movie and you want to sell it to your homie, and I want to point out I did mine almost as a warning shot to you to kind of prep you.
Yeah.
When you're watching Terrifier, I was like, watch out.
Yeah.
This is, and it sets your expectations to a certain level. So even if it doesn't get to that point where it's that bad, you're like, okay, at least I know I didn't lose Thano here.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
But you're telling someone like, hey, this movie's super scary.
Yeah.
Scariest version of Dracula you've ever seen.
Right.
You're like, holy shit.
I'm ready. Yeah.
And then you go in there and it's not.
Yeah.
Then I feel like it hurts your movie, because then when word of mouth is such a huge thing.
Yeah.
And if you don't get that initial crowd, like to then vouch for you because you wrecked their expectations, then you're kind of fucked.
Fair. I think that'll be very wishful thinking on your part,
Oh, I know.
especially given just if you look at the slate of movies coming out this year, it is a stacked list of names.
I am fucking ready, dude.
It is a stacked list of names.
Those writer strikes last year and actor strikes really did a number on Hollywood for 2025.
They did. But then back to like that conversation with this movie, I think part of what builds the hype is that then it was Robert Eggers' first time handling like an established IP.
Yeah.
More so than The Northman, even though The Northman is like legends that inspired Hamlet. Like this is just straight up the title from the last movie. The other thing is I want to know what percentage of people walking into this had no idea that this was basically just the story of Dracula, because I'm convinced that over 50% of the people who saw and will see this movie
Don't.
first heard of Nosferatu from SpongeBob. I am in that market, right? And if it wasn't for the fact that this movie was coming out with Robert Eggers this year and just press from it, I don't think I would have even known that Nosferatu, the OG, was just a Dracula retelling. So hard to temper hype with this movie specifically.
Yeah. I don't disagree. And it's also one of the things where like if you're gonna make a movie that's not necessarily like a straight up horror movie, you can't rely on like the shock of like subverting people's expectations.
Yeah, fair.
Does that make sense?
That's fair.
So like we talked about Hereditary, like as for our last movie review.
Correct.
And like that movie, one of the things was like it was marketed as a very like jump scare, very traditional horror movie.
Yeah.
And so when those expectations were not met, like the initial audience, like the cinema crowd, right, the cinema score audience, like kind of rated it very low.
Yes.
Because they're like, oh, we were promised like jump scares, but instead we were promised like, overbearing grief.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Which there is a market for that.
Right.
And even though you didn't market, like eventually it got that.
It got that market.
It got that crowd.
Good.
But then I feel like this is one of those movies that like it almost promised you that like horror and like that dread, and you just don't get that. And then on top of that, you don't even get like fascinating character development.
Yeah.
Then you're kind of fucked.
I want to know what percentage of people felt the dread. I asked because I saw with my brother-in-law yesterday. I mean, he mentioned there were some scenes where like too scary for him to look, so he had to like look away. And I was like, really? Because there was nothing.
Is this Dennis or is this?
This is Dave. This is Dave.
Is Dave a normie when it comes to horror?
Is Dave a normie when it comes to horror?
So he's a normie.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So he was what?
He was under the influence yesterday. We got the research down here. Real reporting on the Cine-Scoots podcast. Yes.
Yeah, live on the spot.
Exactly.
Live journalism.
Exactly.
All right, but that's the thing. I feel like this is one of those movies, though, that was not targeted for the normie. Robert Eggers, I feel like, is not a normie director.
No, he's fully on in the quote-unquote elevated
art house horror movies, right?
Exactly.
So when
AMC does consider this an artisanal
film,
yep.
Right? It's got the big banner on it, right? So then the problem there becomes when you're marketing this movie to that crowd, you are not gonna hit if you don't deliver.
I also think the other thing too is when you're marketing a quote, because I also wasn't expecting this to be super scary based on the direction that Robert Eggers' work has been going into. I will say though, when you're advertising a movie as an artisanal movie, I think your task in having it meet expectations is also very difficult, because then you need the craft to be so well executed that it's got to stir all sorts of emotions in you. And while my emotions were stirred, it was not stirred so well into a finely condensed stew. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, because here's the thing. So my going off of what you said. So like I would even argue none of his movies have been scary. I would argue as like I
think The
horror.
Witch is disturbing.
The Witch is disturbing.
Yep.
It's got some scenes that are disturbing for sure.
I think The Lighthouse can be disturbing.
But I feel like those movies are more based on like the tension you get from the atmosphere.
Yeah.
This movie has a lot of atmosphere.
Yeah.
But it never has that tension really, except for a few scenes where Count Orlok is interacting with someone else.
Yeah.
And the problem is we really don't get a lot of that.
Yeah.
We get the one scene with Huddle.
Right.
We get the one scene when he is confronting Ellen, the first night. And that's really it.
Yeah.
Like, you don't get that sustained tension, which you get in The Witch. There's scenes where there's nothing really supernatural happening, but because the family is falling apart, because you know that almost the whole family is turning on Anya Taylor-Joy.
Yeah.
Like you have that tension that is never released because there's no jump scare, there's no violence,
Right.
nothing, and you just feel that tension throughout until like the very end of the movie. In this movie, when you have that tension, it immediately ends when the scene ends.
Yeah.
It does not carry over, and then there's also no release.
Yeah.
So you just like
Right.
it just falls, it just fizzles.
Here's a question for you. When you think of Dracula's castle, how many castles do you picture?
What do you mean?
Okay, I'll get to let me jump to the point that I'm trying to make. I think one of the things that doesn't help the telling of the Dracula story in the modern times is that he has two castles. He has his Transylvania castle, and then he has like the estate that he moves into in England / Germany.
Yeah, which is the point of this movie,
right? Which, for all intents and purposes, is another fucking castle, right?
Sure.
Yes, it has castle-like qualities.
Sure.
I think in my brain, and I'd be willing to guess in like a lot of other people's brains too, those are just like the same setting, just in different places. And I think it's hard to make the telling of the movie more interesting, especially in a modern place, because like the plot moves on to take Dracula like away from his home and then to import him here. But then most of your interaction with him here, right, is in just his new home, which reminds you just of like his old home.
In this movie.
In the Dracula story in
Dracula
general.
story.
Because I will say, to this movie's credit, you don't spend a whole lot of time in Dracula Castle #2.
We don't spend any time in Dracula Castle #2.
Except when he goes and burns the...
That's
it. That's it.
5 minutes tops.
Yeah.
Right?
And the ending is probably... I think the ending might be one of my favorite parts of the movie.
In this one?
I think so.
I mean, it's a crescendo. It's like the culmination of everything. It's like, it better be the best thing.
Exactly.
Especially in a movie where, like, again, I'm sorry to say, not much really happens.
Yeah.
I also think that this movie, kind of to your point with the castles, right? And this could be me completely forgetting, because I swear, it's been over 20 years since I've seen Dracula. Because that movie I saw when I was young in Mexico.
Right.
I remember like seeing like the castle, like, and the castle being like a big deal in the Dracula movie throughout the movie.
Mm-hmm.
And this is kind of what you're saying, like you have your castle in the beginning,
and
then he takes his boat, and then he has his pseudo castle, in London, right? But even if it's not necessarily a castle, like it still feels like this grand imposing building, right? Here, we don't spend a lot of time in the castle. Yeah. Like, we see the castle, we see an establishing shot of a castle, but nothing of the scenes in this castle make it feel like an imposing place. Yes. You feel his presence, and that is imposing in and of itself, but you don't feel like this is a huge thing that he owns. You don't feel like he's trapped in this, like, maze of place. And then, to that degree, too, like, when talking about scale of things, we get told that like the plague goes to Germany, but then we don't really see a lot of like the effects of that. We get a few shots of like the streets where people are like, on the ground either dead or dying, and we see a few rats, but I don't think we ever get to see like how overwhelming this is. And it could be the fact that it's only 3 days. Right. Which you're kind of already setting yourself up to kind of like cut yourself short because it's so fast. Like, a plague is not going to develop that fast in 3 days. Yeah. Yes, it's supernatural. Yes, it's going to spread, and yes, it does spread, but I just don't feel that. I feel like that cutoff of like, in 3 nights, I'm going to come and suck your blood. Like, it does not give us enough time to then see the effects that this plague is really happening.
I would have liked to see the effect of Dracula waiting there longer. Yeah. I think the 3 days does it a disservice. I liked the fact that plague was brought into this movie. I thought that was a good historical use of like the dangers of history at that time, and I liked the idea of linking evil and disease together. But yes, I agree. I would have liked to see. It felt like it didn't hit the Goldilocks point of its involvement in the plot. Like it felt like it needed to either just be a little tidbit or footnote, or it needed to be a more prevalent plot point in the film.
And it could be a budget thing. Maybe like they just don't have the amount of extras to like fully show a large scale, like, look at all these dead bodies, or look at how overwhelmed the hospital. Like, we see a bit of like the hospital, right, but not.
And we don't also see it interact with the main characters too much.
The extent of it is the Anna dying, right? The Aaron Taylor Johnson's wife
Does she die from plague or does she die from?
She dies from the plague, from the bites.
Yeah, which if it were a longer time period than 3 days, you could actually see her get like debilitated from the
Yeah, because it's just like she gets bit, and then she's like, "Please let me see my daughters," and then next scene,
she's out.
I believe dead.
Which is not really how the plague spread. It spread from mice, but it spread from mice passing it to like around with their poop and in the food, right? Like it wasn't that the mice were biting you.
No.
Yeah.
These rats were almost like, I don't know, like they were played almost like they would eat people. But then there's that entire scene where they're in Dracula's castle and the rats are just like moving out of the way because of the fire. But like, I mean, the fire's not gonna like overwhelm 1,000 rats.
I kind of just took it as a manifestation of his evil, where like he brings the disgusting things, he brings the disease, right?
Kinda. But he makes a point of like, my plague will continue to spread unless you blah 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 in 3 days. And I think for that to then hold more water and feel like that pressure is to then be able to see what his influence can do in 3 days. And I just don't feel like we see substantial that. For her to be. I think it's like, oh, my friend died. I need to not make this right. And like, I get it.
Yeah.
Kinda. But then that feels less like you're doing it for the greater good. You're doing it for your family.
It would have been cool to see some more societal pressure on our main characters. We get a little bit with Aaron Taylor Johnson's character, where like he's woken up in the middle of the night to go see like the shipwrecked Demeter. So like, I know he's in the shipping business, and then you see like some of that. But if there were more crowds just like pissed at him,
what would you call it?
What would you call
in this movie? In this movie, because you can't call it the Demeter. What would you call this? The Apollo,
the series, right? You use the Latin name. I don't know.
Sure.
Yeah,
I don't know. Like I said, I kind of wish I had. Because this is such a stacked cast.
Yeah.
It's a great cast. Looking at this list, I think I hate to say that the one I expect from the least are Lily Rose Depp and Aaron Taylor Johnson. But even then, I don't feel like they were the weakest links. I just feel like the whole cast is honestly kind of underutilized.
I don't think there's a weak link in the cast at all.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. Like if someone shows me this cast list and says like you have to pick a person who you think is like the weak link here.
No.
I think I would have to like by default go with those two because like Lily Rose Depp, if I'm being honest, other than Yoga Hostess, I haven't seen her in anything.
Right.
I know she was in that really shady show with The Weeknd.
Yeah.
But like, I really don't have anything. And I know Aaron Taylor Johnson's gotten a lot better.
Right.
But like, he has had his like dings in the past.
And he just did Craven.
Yep. So there's that.
Yeah.
Right. But I feel like even with that little caveat of like, those are the ones that I would have to by default consider weakest links. Like, this is still a really, really strong cast.
Absolutely.
And the fact that I feel like the character thing is one of the things that we're lacking the most is kind of telling of like how disappointed I was by this movie. Like, spoiler alert, even though I rated this very high from like a craft perspective, this movie is on my most disappointing of the year.
Yeah, I could see it as being disappointing. I can see
it's not in the worst. I feel like I'm making some caveats there.
We didn't do a best and worst of 2024, and I don't actually particularly feel ready to. Overall this year, I would say there were not a lot of for me, there were not a lot of high highs and there were not a lot of low lows. I think honestly a lot of what I saw this year kind of fit the bell curve.
I think our problem, not problem necessarily, but like I feel like this year we were just so busy.
Yeah, we really only saw the things.
We saw the things that we were like, we're going to see this because we want to see this.
Exactly, yeah.
There were so many times where we were like, we should go see this because we want to see a hot mess. And then we were like, shit, we're busy. We're not going to make the effort to go see it.
Yeah.
Craven was that. There were so many movies in like March and April.
I didn't see Venom. You saw Venom. But I
saw Venom, but I wanted to see Venom.
Right. But yeah, I could see someone being disappointed in this movie. I think I was to a little extent, but I think I did enjoy the craft. And yet, I think all the craft appreciation you could get from this movie, you could also get from just taking an undergrad class on the book Dracula.
Yeah. I just also feel that in the year of our Lord, 2025, and I guess to an extent 2024, because this is when this movie came out, I would just rather get like a full-on Dracula story. Either give me a full-on Dracula story, or give me something completely divorced from the core Dracula lore.
I'm ready for a new vampire.
You know what this movie almost made me very nostalgic for?
Twilight.
Fuck no. You know, all right, hear me out. God, I hate that you're making me do this.
I was only like 10% joking.
I hate that you're making me do this. But at least Twilight did something different.
Sure.
At least Twilight had
Yeah.
the balls to be like, we are making this vampire movie into a love triangle with werewolves.
Right.
But even then, my real point here is it made me miss Underworld.
Yeah.
Underworld is such a gem to me. It's such a 2000s movie. And then, like, I would say the first 3 movies are actually legitimately great.
I mean, now that the mid 2000s are straight up 20 years ago, I think you might. I
want either a legacy sequel or a remake.
I think it's time for the vampire market to get saturated again.
Hell yeah, dude.
Hell yeah.
We ran zombies to the ground. I think it's time for us to run vampires back to the ground again.
And then run zombies back into the ground again.
Yeah. I mean, we're getting the werewolf movie.
I'm ready for the werewolf.
Okay, so hear me out. So we've had The Invisible Man.
Yep.
He did another movie recently that was also in that vein, wasn't it?
I'm trying to remember.
I think there were 2 movies so far that have been in that like monster-verse type of thing. But anyway, Lee Winnell did Invisible Man in a new modern tech type of way.
That movie's got to be close to 10 years old now.
No, it's 2020.
Is it that old? Or is it that young?
Dude, it was like one of the last movies we watched before we got shut down for COVID.
Wow. Yeah.
He's doing The Wolfman.
Yep.
If guy who did Evil Dead Rise is doing The Mummy.
Yes.
If they can tie those 3 movies together
your dark universe?
I want him to give me a Dracula movie. I could trust Lee Winnell to give me a badass, genuinely scary Dracula movie. Because, like, even though the Invisible Man is not, like, a supernaturally scary movie, the way that, like, he uses manipulation...
It is very intense.
Is extremely intense.
Yeah.
And, like, that shit goes a long way. So I'm very curious. I'm a little concerned that it's a January movie, but I also feel like that's also a very good spot to put a movie that could thrive in, like, a surprising way. Like, if this movie's good, it's going to make hella bank because there's no other competition in January.
Except Megan 2.
I'm so fucking excited. Apparently, from what I heard, and this is like a rumor, so take this shit with like a teaspoon of salt.
After we talk about expectations, but continue.
From what I heard, one of the rumors is that Megan 2 is following the Terminator route.
Oh, interesting.
Where like Megan, like M3 was like Terminator, where she's the baddie,
right?
And then apparently in Megan 2, the plot right now is just a new doll by the competition.
Interesting.
That is then going to be going after Katie.
Yeah.
Which then causes Megan to leave the AI in the house.
Yeah.
To rebuild her body to help Katie.
Fascinating.
And I'm like, you know what? If you're giving me Terminator but with a little girl doll, fuck yeah, dude.
We're here for it.
I'm here for this.
Yeah.
Anyway, is there anything that you feel that you need to say about this movie?
I want to see how this movie ages with the crowd at large, because I feel like our review is more down on this movie than average.
Yes,
I would love.
Oh, for sure.
I would love to see how this movie ages, because I think by and large, his first 3 have aged relatively well in the collective memory.
Whose history?
Robert Eggers.
Robert Eggers?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm curious to see how people tend to feel about this movie as a whole.
So,
and maybe we're just wrong.
Here's the thing about this movie. Critically speaking, this is his lowest critically rated movie.
Yeah.
I believe I have it on the thing at 86%.
Yep.
Right? The Witch, 91. Northman, 90. Lighthouse, 90.
Yeah.
Right? But audience-wise, The Witch, 60. The Northman, 64. The Lighthouse, 72. And now this one, I believe, is like in the 80s?
Wow.
70s?
So this was really his
71. So still...
This is his most normie... This is his most
normie
movie.
This is his most normie movie.
Which, fair. You took the most famous horror story told, and you basically just put it to the screen.
Yeah. And again, it's not a bad movie, but I just kind of wish at this point, like, we had just gone full on and just done... I kind of almost wish he had done an actual Bram Stoker's Dracula movie.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was like it was cheaper to get the rights to Nosferatu.
Who knows? Who knows?
Is that in public domain now? Nosferatu?
I don't know.
Because, like, that would be the only reason why... Because Dracula's from 1922. The 30s. No, Dracula's older. Sorry.
No. Nosferatu is 1922. Dracula, the movie, is 1930-something. But... So it's over 100 years old.
So Dracula, the novel, is currently based in public... It's currently domain.
The novel was the 1890s.
So, like, just fucking do it.
Yeah.
At this point, why do the derivative when you can then just take the original and reinvent it?
No, because I think it was more marketable. I think there's more intrigue in that thing that
In the
most people
knockoff?
know from SpongeBob. I'm
You
serious.
think he went for the meme?
No, not the meme, but I think it's harder to market a just straight up Dracula movie now than it was to market this. Because like I've said, I'm curious to see how many people walked into this movie and came out surprised that it really just is like Dracula.
So the uncultured.
The uncultured.
The uncultured.
Yeah, the
All
uncultured.
right. On that wonderful note, we are going to wrap up our coverage of Dracula Not on the Boat, but also Not Dracula.
Not Dracula, not on a boat.
Not Dracula, Not on the Boat. Very, 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 very briefly on the boat.
Yeah.
We will be back with probably the start of a series. An early Happy New Year gift to everybody.
Exactly.
We're going to be covering six
projects.
6 recordings.
Vastly varying.
Yeah,
style.
We've got some anime.
Yep.
We got some schlock.
Yep.
We got some very serious movies. We got some
peak cinema.
Some peak cinema coming. And then we'll probably look at getting a best of, worst of, anticipation.
Yes.
Briefly. But thank you all for listening.
Yeah.
Hopefully people enjoy this movie. I mean, just because I didn't love it doesn't mean people
you want you to
for
be happy.
Sure didn't.
We want you to be happy. Millions of soon to be billions of fans.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
All right, everybody. Until next time, he has been Thano.
He has been Javier.
And this has been the Cine-Scoots Movie Show.
Bye.